Hello folks of the grand world. Today we are doing another video following up the full moon in Aquarius that we just talked about, and this is going to be more in specifics to certain situations that you may experience or incur as you are going on your journey to self-advocate, self-respect, self-love, things of that nature. Okay. So essentially, and I'm going to pull up the Claude, fuck ChatGPT. Only because of who owns it. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. There is certain ways that people try to do shit in certain situations, and we'll get to that here. So check me out. I'm gonna give an example, and then we'll get into the deeper dive of it in a second. So like whenever you go to McDonald's, right? That's just a very clear example that most people can catch on and latch onto. And the funny run-on joke is, oh wow, the ice cream machine is broken. But that's actually a psychological program running underneath, and I'm gonna let you know how in a second. So how sometimes you be like, hey, before you even say something, you walk up to the counter and they're like, hey, oh yeah, the machine don't work. And then you say, okay, all right, that's fine. Or you'll question, hey, can you try real quick? And then the person of the worker starts to get pissed off at you and passive aggressive and mad as fuck and all that shit, right? Okay, hold on. That's actually a subtle way of causing friction to you, which don't have anything to do with you. But it's a way to cause friction for you to be deterred and not move forward. They're attempting to indirectly, because they're not supposed to or allowed to, tell you no. And I'm gonna show you the deeper implications of this now. So here you go. This is a couple different ways it can be depending on the situation. But the first one we have is called malicious compliance / soft refusal, okay? This is where someone puts up a low effort obstacle. So like I said, for example, let's say it's the ice cream machine. Oh, it's broken. And the reason why they put this low effort obstacle, they hope that you will self-select out and you'll just say, oh, okay, well, you don't have what I need, so okay, fine. Because sometimes, I'm not going to say most people because that's a dangerous worldview to say, but let's just say there are individuals who only go through shit easily and don't put up with anything to genuinely get what they really want. I'll give you an example. Let's say if you really that day said, I only want McDonald's ice cream. If you say, hey, check the machine or get someone to fix it or something, and then they actually do that and then they get pissed off at you, that's an example. Most people won't be willing to do that. Or I'm not going to say most people, there's just a certain amount of people that won't. The average individual will probably go down the route of least resistance, more than likely. Not saying that's what is the case, but that can be the case. So let's continue. So then it's talking about, right, they'll hope you self-select out so they never have to actually do the thing that you're asking of them. It is not quite malicious compliance because there's kind of a difference a bit. Malicious compliance versus soft refusal. They're saying here, which in my experience I relate to, malicious compliance, that's doing a task badly on purpose to prove a point. That's when someone, for example, you say, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z? And then they all oh, okay. But you're like, I don't give a fuck, do it anyway. And then they do it bad. And then they go, oh, well, it just came out. It's like, nigga, you did that on purpose, bro. Right? And that's their way of trying to get back at you in a sense. That's that way. Now the other one is more so the soft refusal. That's tied to this right here what I'm about to get into. The malicious is also called friction is gatekeeping and using minor obstacles or discouragement as an informal, meaning indirect way. So or only people who push back, they actually get what they ask for. And everyone else just walks away because they didn't want to deal with whatever the obstacle was or deal with waiting or being patient or whatever, right? Now there's more. Then there's also something apparently called learned helplessness inversion. Hold on. So learned helplessness inversion or effort avoidance. This is more so on the individual that is causing you the friction and not trying to do what the fuck you're asking them to do. Learned helplessness inversion or effort avoidance. That's when the person has learned that most people won't push back at the first no that they give to said individual, right? Meaning, like I say, oh, the ice cream machine don't work. Oh, those people say, okay, all right, whatever, right? Now there's some people that's like, nigga, no, we want that Oreo ice cream. So go fucking figure it out. And they're like, ugh. Right? That person has learned that most people won't push past the first no or the first inconvenience. Because like I say, some people just only give a fuck about convenience. This is why they don't grow. Or they refuse friction to growing. Getting rid of old ways. Anyways. Or the first inconvenience that people deal with, right, that they recognize in this dynamic. So putting up a small barrier is a low-key way to reduce their own workload. Now, it's not always malicious because sometimes it could be based off of burnout or someone genuinely not liking what the fuck they're doing. But then again, that's not a you problem, that's a them problem. You signed yourself up for whatever the fuck position that you're in life to some extent, okay? And if those individuals are projecting that type of shit out onto you, right, first off, they can go eat a dick. Me personally, how I do shit and how I handle it, I say, hey, figure this the fuck out, or I'm going to go to the next person that fucking can, their manager or whatever, and then I'll be reporting, yo, dumbass. How about that? Usually they get their fucking act together. Or if they double down on ego, I'll say, okay, well, hey, owner, hey, manager, hey, blah, 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 figure this out. And if them motherfuckers on stupid shit, then okay, let's get the authorities involved. Let's get the embassy involved. Because I'm not going to deal with your fucking clownery, buffoonery. You shouldn't either. But that's your choice. I'm not going to tell you what the fuck to do. You're grown. Anyway, continuing. Quick maths now. There's also another dynamic that is within this called learn helplessness inversion. Right? Which the person has learned that most people won't push past the first no or the first inconvenience. So putting up a small barrier is a low cost way to reduce their own workload. And even though it's not always malicious, sometimes it can be based off of fatigue, burnout, or expressing itself as passive gatekeeping, right? That's just making it synopsis for you very easy. Sometimes also the resentment at being made to do their fucking job is what they're trying to project onto you if they act that passive aggressive way. This is the piece that I was talking to them about because I was checking myself on the situation. And this is due to when that person's identity around the task is they don't really want to be doing that shit, like we talked about earlier. And then you don't give a fuck about their bullshit ass attitude and you say, do it anyway, right? Their own frustration isn't at you. Of course it's not. It's their projection of how the fuck they feel about their own lives. It's at having their avoidance strategy fail, right? Which, like I say, if they're doing that, that means they probably avoid the real authenticity of them being real with themselves in their own lives, okay? That's why you work at where the fuck you work at, just saying. And you just remove their exit from essentially indirectly saying no. You get me? Okay, now continuing. Then on the bigger level, now this is more institutional based, right? So we went to the micro, now we're getting to the macro. The institutional version of this shit is called friction is policy. Listen up now, because this may definitely resonate. Well documented in customer service, claims, and insurance context specifically, where minor bureaucratic obstacles, repeat documentation requests as an example, vague denials as an example, or slow response times, they are functions that's put there on purpose, even though they might not overtly state this is what we're trying to do. They do that to function to reduce successful claims, not through explicit denial, but through essentially indirect way of saying, nah, I can't do it. Betting that most percentage of people will just simply give up, right? But, and this is where we got the light at the end of the tunnel, but through attrition and essentially just saying, I'm not going to take no for an answer, betting that a percentage of people will just simply give up, right? That tactic is called delay, deny, and defend. But usually the people that push fully through usually get what they're asking for. And I give an example, like say if, there's a certain company that's doing stupid shit, flaw shit, and then you say, hey, you send them a formal notice, do this shit or I'm going to file a fucking counter lawsuit on your stupid ass and sue you. And they say, okay, do it. Essentially, indirectly, right? Most people will, I ain't gonna say most people, but there's a good amount of people that will just say, right, and they don't really follow through with that shit. The people that do are usually the people that end up at the end of the case. Before the case even goes to court, they get their due diligence and their remedy. So that's just an example of this in the masterclass. I pray and I know that you enjoyed Have a good fucking day.